The Dragonback Series by Timothy Zahn. Book 6. Dragon and Liberator. Chapter 30. Oh, for crying out loud, Jack growled, as for the third time the Advocatus Diaboli veered sharply away, just as the Essene was getting close. Hold still, will you? Yeah, so that you can dock and get aboard, Uncle Verge said. Nah, not likely. Nah. Do you want me to try? Dracos offered. I know some maneuvers Neverland won't be expecting. Thanks, but I'd rather have you riding my skin in case they try the death on us again, Jack said. Don't worry, he can't outrun us forever. Movement, Uncle Verge said. Those 5 Gen 90s ahead of us are looping back. Jack looked at the display. The fighters were curving around all right, headed back toward the Advocatus Diaboli and the Essene. And meanwhile, the Advocatus Diaboli had just straightened out again. Straightened out very invitingly, in fact. Draco spotted it too. He's trying to lure you onto a path that will give the Gen 90s a clear shot, the Kada warned. Just means I have to finish this before they get in range, Jack said. That was easier said than done. The Advocatus Diaboli kept backing away as Jack tried to get the Essene close enough for a crash dock. He kept half an eye on the bigger ship, the other half on the ranging data from the Gen 90 scrolling across the navigation screen. It was going to be close. Wait a minute, Uncle Verge said, sounding puzzled. Something's wrong. 3 of the Braxton ships have started in toward us again. On full power, too, Which 3? Jack asked. The big yacht and 2 of the security ships, Uncle Verge said. They're moving into attack formation, Braxton's trying to draw away the Gen 90s, Draco suggested. Jack hissed between his teeth. Yes, that was exactly what Braxton was trying to do. The problem was, by the time they got into the attack range of the Malison Ring fighters, they would themselves be within range of the death. Give me a signal to them, he told Uncle Verge. Mr. Braxton! Yo, Mr. Braxton!
I'm here, Jack,
Braxton's voice came.
Hang on, we're coming.
Well, don't, Jack said tartly. Didn't you hear what I said about the death? To his amazement, Braxton actually chuckled.
Perfectly,
the older man assured him.
It just so happens I have a little surprise for Mr. Neverland. Subin, would you like to say hello to Jack?
Jack frowned. What in the world? And then a strangely deep, strangely alien voice came over the speaker. Hello, Jack, it said. It is good to hear your voice again. Again? Who is this? Jack asked. I am now called Subin, the other said. But you knew me as Snip. Jack frowned even harder. Snip? It sounded familiar. He caught his breath. Snip? He said. You mean special needs Puka? You used to rub my ears and jaw to calm my fears, Subin confirmed. I am pleased you remembered me. Jack shook his head wordlessly. He'd left Snip and the rest of his fellow Pukas back on Rose Scrovy with the Erasphus, who served as their hosts. How did you get...
We rescued them, of course.
Braxton came back on.
A lost colony of Kada would have been far too tempting a target for Neverland if he'd found out about them. We took them off Rose Scrovy, woke them up, and brought them along as a good faith gesture of friendship to the Kada and Shantine.
He chuckled again.
Ironic, isn't it? All along, I assumed we were the ones protecting them. Now it seems they're going to be the ones protecting us.
You all have them? Jack asked, just to make sure.
Everyone aboard these 3 ships,
Braxton confirmed.
That's why we're the ones moving in.
But how'd you even know about them? Jack asked.
Later,
Braxton said briskly.
Right now, I see that Mr. Neverland has noticed our intentions.
Jack looked at the display. 3 of the 5 Jin 90s that had been on course for the SNA had turned around again, heading back to intercept the incoming Braxton Universalis ships. Leaving us only 2 to handle, Jack muttered. I guess that's better than nothing. It's a lot better than nothing, Jack lad, yeah? Uncle Verge said, a dark slyness on his voice. Now, one of those 2 ships is Langston's. He'd barely finished the comment when the rearmost of the 2 approaching Jin 90s blew the other one out of the sky. You're clear, Jack, Langston's voice came over the radio. What else do you need? Nothing, Jack said. The Advocatus Diaboli, its use as bait suddenly gone, twisted violently away again. Only this time, the maneuver was too late. Just get yourself clear, Jack added as he turned the SNA forward. Go hook up with the rest of Braxton's group and wait to help with the cleanup. What about you? The Advocatus Diaboli loomed directly ahead. Clenching his teeth, Jack turned the control yoke hard to the left. With a horrendous grinding of metal, the 2 ships slammed together. For a long second, the SNA slid forward along the bigger ship's side, still grinding metal. And then, with a lurch that threw Jack hard against his straps, the SNA came to an abrupt halt. Hatches linked, Uncle Verge announced. Or at least, close enough. Jack, Langston called, what are you doing? We're going to destroy the Death, Jack told him. I don't suppose you happen to know where they've got it mounted. I saw them kill Harper with it, remember? Langston said grimly. It's in the forward bulk storage room, upper deck, all the way at the bow. Got it, Jack said. Thanks. Good luck, Langston said. I'll see you later. Jack grimaced. Let's hope so. The Advocatus Diaboli shuddered with the impact, the distant scream of tortured metal echoing through the empty corridors all the way to the bridge. Allison winced, her ears throbbing with the screeching. And then she was nearly knocked off her feet as the SNA caught the larger ship's docking collar. He's here! Frost spat. Sergeant, get a squad to the starboard docking station. No, the Velaga ordered. We go instead to the bow. Everyone goes. You want to give Morgan the run of the ship? Frost demanded. He may have all that he wishes, the Velaga said coldly. When we stand beside the Death, we will release it from its mount and sweep it through everywhere else. And then what? Frost asked. He and the Kadar are immune, remember? Only if they're together, the Lord Highest whispered. Neverland looked thoughtful. I think we can arrange something that'll get them apart. Get everyone to the death weapon chamber, now! I hope you know what you're doing, Frost warned. Both of you! We do, Neverland said. Now get going. He gestured to the guards holding Allison's arms. Then bring her too. If the Death isn't enough bait for Morgan, then the Kada, maybe she will be. The Advocatus Diaboli's airlock had been slightly warped by the impact, but it was functional enough. Slipping inside, Jack pressed his back against the inner door. What kind of reception committee have we got waiting? He asked Dracos. The Kada peered over the door. I see nothing, he reported, sounding both surprised and more than a little suspicious. They may have set up an ambush in one of the cross corridors. Let's find out. Hefting his tangler, Jack keyed the door. It slid open with another screech of tortured metal. He ducked out into the corridor for a quick look, then ducked back into cover again. No one shot at him. I don't smell anyone nearby, Draco said, his tongue flicking up from Jack's shoulder. Shall I go investigate? Better not, Jack said. An ambush we can hopefully spot before we get in range. They don't have to be nearly that obvious to turn the Death around and shoot it at us. Then let us deal with it, Draco said firmly. They set off down the corridor, Jack holding his tangler ready, Dracos' tongue rhythmically darting out and tasting the air. But for all the signs of life they found, the ship might have been deserted. Where is everyone? Jack asked as they passed the ship's midpoint. In the bow, Dracos said. You were right. They're planning to use the death against us. Good luck to them, Jack said. How do they think they're going to get you to come off me? By also attacking us with normal weapons, Dracos said. Frost knows I'll have to leave you if I'm going to defend you against his men. Jack chewed the inside of his cheek. Unfortunately, that made a lot of sense. So we need to get you to the death before he can get his guns lined up? Or get me past the guns before we attack the death, Dracos said. Jack grimaced. Sounds like your classic chicken and egg problem. Pardon? Never mind. Tell you later, Jack said. I guess we're playing this one by ear. They continued forward through the still deserted ship. Maybe we can get to the death room from underneath, Jack suggested as they walked. Or maybe we can just cut off the power. We can try, Draco said doubtfully. But I suspect Frost has blocked any threats that obvious. Frost had. They reached the mid-deck bow to discover that all the forward compartments had been sealed. And no one's getting in there anytime soon either, Jack said, pointing to a red light on the door's release switch. They've opened that whole section to vacuum. Including all the power connections to the death room. And including the system's backup generator, Jack confirmed. I guess it's a frontal assault or nothing. Then let us not keep them waiting, Draco said. Fine with me, Jack said, feeling his heart start to race again. But we've got one more stop to make first. If they've moved the death into a bulk storage room, it stands to reason they must have moved all the bulk storage itself out. Let's find out where they put it. Hurry up with that thing! Frost growled as the two Valaga worked to disassembling the swivels of the death weapon's mount. Come on! Come on! It is not easy to work in these confines, the Lord Highest countered stiffly. He had a point, Allison had to agree. The storage room followed the shape of the ship's bow, reasonably wide at the aft end by the door, but narrowing considerably toward the bow where the death weapon had been mounted. And with Neverland, Allison, Frost, the three Valaga, and 6 crewmen crammed in that narrower area, the Valaga didn't have a lot of extra room to work with. Relax, Colonel, Neverland said calmly from Allison's side. We have time. He nudged Allison's shoulder, nodding back toward the door. I trust you approve of our tactical landscape. Allison looked toward the room's door, her stomach tightening. The ship's 12 resident Malison Ring mercenaries were facing the door, 5 of them kneeling, another 5 standing behind them, the last 2 another pace back from the double firing line as backup. It's beautiful, she said. Dracos will cut through it like winter wheat. I hope he tries, Neverland said. I understand Kada evaporate into thin air when they die. I'd like to see that. Allison's eyes flicked up to the ventilation grill just above the door. She hadn't seen Tanim since the Kada had wrecked the jamming equipment and Allison had ordered her to go hide. She hoped Tanim had obeyed. She hoped even more that the Kada had found a hiding place somewhere forward and in the lower deck where Neverland's planned sweep of the death might miss her. Jack found the displaced storage items on the 3rd door he tried, 2 doors after the death room. Everything he'd hoped for was there. 3 minutes later, he was ready. Okay, he said, running a critical eye over his masterpiece. A rolling cart with 3 oxygen tanks strapped to it, 20 feet back from the death room and lined up squarely on its door. We're good to go. You ready? Yes, Dracos hesitated. Jack, if this doesn't work... It's okay, Simby, Jack said, a lump coming to his throat. We already said our goodbyes, remember? Yes, Draco said. The moment had passed, and he was all business again. Do you want me to take another look over the door? No time, Jack said. They look like they might have the death free any second now. Besides, where could anyone possibly have moved in there? Point! Dracos agreed. Then let's do it! He leaped out of Jack's collar and landed on the deck beside the cart. Jack moved up to the door, his usual full-size tangler in his right hand, Harper's tiny palm grip tangler hidden in his left. Holding the butt of his tangler an inch away from the door release, he looked back at Dracos and nodded. With a triple slash of his claws, Dracos sliced the ends off all 3 oxygen tanks. The cart surged forward, picking up speed as the escaping gas drove it forward like a small rolling rocket. Dracos loped along beside it, picking up his pace as the cart sped up, nudging it back on track whenever it started to drift off target. Jack watched it come, holding out his left hand toward Dracos as he judged his timing. A second before the cart reached the door, Dracos leaped up and forward, catching the back of Jack's hand and melting onto his arm. A half-second later, with the cart still picking up speed, Jack tapped the butt of his tangler into the release. The door opened, and Jack leaned around the edge. Catch! He called, tossing his tangler in a high arc into the room. Several of the mercenaries instinctively looked upward toward the flying weapon, before suddenly spotting the cart roaring through the door toward them. The soldiers directly in front of it scrambled to get out of its way. As they did so, Jack lifted his left hand and fired both shots of Harper's tangler. The cartridges hit the side of one of the oxygen tanks and burst open, their milky white threads snagging the nearest of the kneeling mercenaries and anchoring him solidly to the careening cart. The sudden drag sent the cart pivoting sharply to the side, changing its course and bouncing it into and across more of the mercenaries. And as it careened through their neat double line, Dracos leaped out over Jack's sleeve. He landed in front of the nearest mercenary just as the other got clear of the cart and started to bring his gun back around toward his attacker. The Kada got there first, slapping his paw against the man's gun hand and deflecting it to the side. But instead of leaping to the next soldier in line, the Kada simply vanished up the first man's sleeve. Someone gasped accursed. But before anyone could move, Dracos was back, bounding out the back of the man's collar toward the soldier behind him. Again, his outstretched paws caught the man's hand, and he slid out of sight up his sleeve, his tail managing to slap across the head of the next man in line before he vanished. No! Neverland bellowed over the chaos. Shoot them! Dracos leaped out of the mercenary's collar, headed for a man a couple of steps farther back on the right-hand side of the group. Beyond him, a pair of Valaga heaved the long death weapon cylinder off its mount and swiveled it around toward Jack. And as it started its turn, the end erupted with the familiar sickly yellow flash and violet light of the death. Cutting through the soldiers to Jack's left, it swept ponderously toward him. There was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. Instinctively, Jack leaped forward into the room, diving for the deck. His last glimpse before the struggling soldiers blocked his view was that of Allison breaking free from Neverland's grip and throwing her body at the side of the weapon in a desperate attempt to slow it down. But it was a futile gesture, and Jack knew it. Even with her interference, he had no more than a second before the beam would sweep over him. Allison could do no more. Dracos was already an eternity too far away. Jack hit the deck chest first, the impact knocking half the wind out of him, and prepared himself to die. And then the rest of the air was knocked out of him as something hard and heavy slammed into his shoulders and the back of his neck. The sudden weight vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. The violet beam swept over him, and he felt the by now familiar tingle. The tingle and nothing else. He heard the hum of the weapon change pitch slightly as it halted its swing and came back toward him to try again. And then the hum was drowned out by the thunder of a pair of gunshots. The hum vanished, and the room fell abruptly silent. Cautiously, Jack raised his head. The mercenaries who had been standing in front of him were lying crumpled on the deck. All dead. The death weapon itself was lying on the deck too, as were the 2 Valaga who had been holding it. A third Valaga was still standing, something that looked like a weapon in his hand, and pointed down at Allison, who was sprawled frozen on the deck looking up at him. To Jack's right, Dracos was crouched on the deck, poised to spring. His green eyes glittered as he stared unblinkingly at the Valaga. Pressed against the curved bulkhead as far back as they could get were Neverland and 6 white-clad crewmen. And standing between Dracos and the Valaga, no more than a step back out of their line of sight, was Frost. His gun was in his hand, pointed at the Valaga. "Lower the weapon!" Frost told the alien. "You hear me?" "They must die!" the Valaga insisted, his voice sounding utterly alien. "They must all die!" "There's no point," Frost said. "It's over. It's all over. Surrender and you can still live." The Valaga snarled something in his own language. "Do not mock me!" "He isn't mocking you," Draco said. His voice was low and bitter and deadly. "If you surrender, you will be allowed to return with a message." "What message, Kata?" the Valaga spat. "That the power of the Valaga is broken," Draco said. "That if you ever come again to this region of space, you will be destroyed." His tail flicked. "But you will only live to carry that message if you lower your weapon." "Better take him up on the offer," Jack advised, standing up and taking a couple of steps toward the standoff. A risky move, he knew, but giving the Valaga one more target to choose from might give Dracos the opening he needed. "You don't want your people always wondering what happened out here, do you?" The Valaga flashed Jack an unreadable look. "Come on," Jack cajoled. "You don't want to die, do you?" The Valaga looked down at Allison. "Don't do it," Jack warned. And with a scream that seemed to shake Jack's teeth, Tanim leapt out of his collar. The Valaga twisted his arm up and around, trying to bring his weapon to bear on this sudden new threat. He never made it. Before the gun was even halfway to its target, Dracos leaped across the open gap and buried his claws in the Valaga's throat. The gun went off, sizzling a blast of blue-white energy into the ceiling, then dropped to the deck. "Now!" Dracos said. "It is over!" Jack took a deep breath. "I guess they'll never know what happened now, will they?" "Perhaps not," Draco said, turning to face Frost. Frost, whose gun was still pointed at the dead Valaga. Only now, Jack realized suddenly, it was pointed at Dracos. Neverland spotted it too. "Do it!" he muttered urgently, taking a step forward. Without even looking at him, Frost swiveled his gun away from Dracos and pointed it at Neverland. "As he said, sir, it's over." He looked at Jack. "Give Braxton a call," he said. "Tell him I want to make a deal with him, and only with him." "Sure, no problem," Jack said. Picking his way through the sprawled Malison ring bodies, he stopped in front of Frost and held out his hand. The other hesitated, then turned the gun around and handed it to Jack. "The keys to Allison's cuffs would be nice, too," Jack suggested as Allison got awkwardly back to her feet. Frost shook his head. "I don't have them. Not sure who does." "Allow me," Draco said. Inserting one claw into the handcuff chain, he sliced through it. "Thanks," Allison said, wincing as she brought her hands back around again. "That's hard on the shoulders," she commented. "You all right?" "I'm fine," Jack assured her. "Yes, I can see that," Allison said dryly. "I was talking to Tanim." "I'm also fine," Tanim said. Somewhat hesitantly, she moved forward. "I know you told me to hide, but I couldn't leave you alone. I hope I did all right." "You did more than all right, Tanim," Allison assured her, reaching over to stroke her head. "I'm sure Jack and Dracos agree." "And then some," Jack agreed. "Thanks for saving my life." "You did the same for me on Rose Grovey," Tanim said simply. "I'm glad
glad I was able to repay you.
Jack cleared his throat. Speaking of payments and paybacks, we'd better get Braxton on the radio. He eyed Allison. You know he came all the way out here personally to find you? Allison shrugged. I thought he might.
I hope he hangs you,
Neverland said bitterly.
Whoever you really stole that tracer for, I hope he well and truly hangs you.
He does seem to want you pretty badly, Jack warned. Yes, I suppose he does, Allison agreed. She smiled at Neverland. But then, grandfathers are like that.